Thank you, Aisling, John, Mark, for giving us the opportunity to speak here today. It's a really interesting event. We're performing a pre-feasibility study driven by SEAI's guidelines for district heating for the Tullamore area. It builds on previous work we've done on the decarbonisation zone. And we'd also like to just thank those stakeholders that we've met, such as Rory, who've been fantastic with their time, generous with their time, their information. We've had a number of businesses in the area contribute in. We've had the council contribute in. We've had the HSE contribute in. And it's really beginning to gain momentum. As well as, very likely a real positive case for district heating in Tullamore. So look, we'll start with the case for this. So as everyone knows, Ireland wants to be a net zero economy for 2050, very aggressive targets for 2030, challenges around hitting those targets. Some fantastic developments in some areas. Renewable electricity is one that's always being talked about, and how we have managed to hit targets in the past. They get ever more challenging as the penetration of renewables on the power system gets higher and higher, and it becomes harder to solve individual problems. Transport has actually done quite well. It was a late starter, but it's doing quite well. Things like reducing costs of public transport. I know that's affected my life. It's made it much easier for me to take public transport. Are having really meaningful impacts too. Heat. What do we do? We combust things all the time. And what do we combust? Imported fossil fuels. So heat has been has not had the progress either over the long duration like renewable electricity, or in more recent years like transport in Ireland, and we need to tackle it. We need to get to grips with it. So as you can see, 24% of Ireland's emissions is coming from heat, because we burn lots of things, and of what we burn, 90% of it is fossil fuels. 85% of it is imported fossil fuels. So we're bringing someone else's fuel in here, we're sending money abroad to combust something to create heat. Can we create that heat in a different way? Create our local, improve our environment, respond to climate change, but keep some of that money locally as well, right? Nationally or in our communities. District heating is a solution for doing this. This is highly, highly, highly mature across Europe and other areas. So, 67 million customers across Europe, 17,000 district heat networks. One thing I find interesting is I've been in Big Four, so the Big Four consultancies for about 10 years. 10 years ago, I looked at my first district heating project in Dublin. It's effectively gone nowhere, right? Now, ultimately it might happen, but in 10 years, we've kind of been talking about this, but we just haven't done it in Ireland. When we talk to our colleagues in the Nordics, we talk to our colleagues in the Baltics, they do these every year. Right? You go in at various scales. We'll come to the housing one in a second. Can you go into individual housing estates? Does it make sense? Moving to your industrial users, your farmers, where we have a huge amount of we're doing work at the moment. I'm looking at the emissions profile from heat in the industrial sector, and it's effectively in Ireland that's cement, artificial alumina, which exports, and then it's all dairy and pharma. We export. So they need high temperature heat to all dairy and pharma is where those emissions are coming from in terms of our economy. But abroad they can do this. So what is it? So instead of having each building having its own boiler, and again this can be residential, this can be industrial, you have one central facility that produces the heat and it pipes the heat to you. No difference to, you can have a group water scheme. You get telecoms through a grid or a network. You get your electricity through a grid or a network. You get your gas through a grid or a network. So shared infrastructure to serve your individual house. So rather than having one boiler, one centralized boiler, and you get delivery of the service. A range of businesses doing this. So it is the residential, and it is the commercial, and it is the local authority, and it is the industry. Now, it's again, like the power system or like your broadband. What do you need? Do you need a gigabit broadband? Do you need 500 megawatt? So the shared infrastructure allows, the large anchor tenants pay, be the anchor for the investment, create that need for the heat, create the investment in the source of heat, and then other customers come along and share it and underpin the whole investment. And the truth is, today in Europe, a lot of these facilities run on, so in some cases it's waste heat, and by waste heat we mean, and the Dutch are very good at this, you have a power station, it's in an urban area. Well, rather than taking burning the fossil fuels and sending the waste heat up the stack, why don't we reuse that? And look, there's a lot of talk of waste heat in Ireland. It's not actually a huge amount, and there's not huge amount in Tullamore. We've gone through a number of enterprises here. On the positive side, they're really, really efficient. So they're not wasting money. They're not wasting things for the environment where you're selling products and it's got a reduced carbon footprint. And so in Europe, a lot of it is still based off fossil fuels. All right. Now, maybe go up to the Nordics, they have a lot of biomass, so forestry resources, so they will use that. But in general, it can be people running CHPs, combined heat and power plants, can be running other power plants. But there's definitely a shift towards more renewable or climate-friendly resources. Geothermal is absolutely in there. But if you looked at the chart on your right-hand side, so CHP plants, waste energy plants like Indover and Dunleer, like Covanta's, the Dublin Waste Energy, why are they letting that heat go to waste? Wastewater treatment works will become particularly interesting in the next slide or two. Data centers, big source of heat, clearly none here, but they do exist extensively in Dublin. This is kind of a national need. Industrial processes, and then the off-takers are a variety of businesses. So looking at Ireland, what do we have? We have targets, but we don't have a huge amount of progress yet, right? So we're trying to find where are the sites that we move, we do something soon. Where does it work? And we can actually demonstrate, learn from it, and then roll it out again across Ireland. So maybe we'll start at the bottom left, and based on our data, we agree. So this is from Climate Action Plan 24. Our understanding remains the same. So one scheme in Tala, where AWS, Amazon Web Services data center, provides its low temperature heat, waste heat to a local network, and the hospital is served and a campus is served. That took a long time to get that one small scale in place. We never managed to land one of the big pieces in the past, the waste to energy plants, that kind of thing. While our targets, so I'd ignore the 2025 target. We need to be looking at that 2030 timeframe. National target of 2.7 terawatt hours. So we need to really grow this quickly. Most of that supply is going for the residential, then also with some elements into commercial. What are the benefits to the customers, be the industry or domestics? So I will say over the long term, you get your lower energy costs. So I'm not going out getting my boiler. I don't need to get my boiler serviced. I don't need to get my boiler replaced. I'm not at the vulnerability of, if we get this right, we're not at the vulnerability of gas price shocks or any other fossil fuel price shocks, and the money's not leaving the state. I need heat, so somebody delivers through a pipe heat. In the same way, if I want broadband, it's delivered through a pipe. I want electricity. And yes, I can do on-site solar, so I can do other elements in my private premises, but it's a shared infrastructure. Most importantly, low or zero carbon emissions. So depending on your source of heat, and then over time, as we go from 2030 to 2040, maybe we start with low, but ultimately we get down to zero carbon. Because into your home, into your business is just heat coming in. Over time, all you need to do is, if you want to go from low to zero carbon, is replace the source. Swap out the source, swap in a heat pump that is powered by renewable electricity, if it needs to be something else in the short term. And as I kind of touched on already, reliable and low maintenance at the point of use. So you're not worried about the complexity of anything. It's run by a grid. So we've assisted Offaly County Council with a pre-feasibility study. The structure here, so say SEAI has this framework of guidance, and again, they've been quite generous with the time to wing us through. This is all evolving as we go. So even when we started this project, they had somewhat of a framework and they had some guidelines out when we went through the project. And they haven't released the guidelines yet, but they shared them with us. So they further information of what they want presented. And ultimately, the conclusion is we're in a good spot. We're in a good place where they've key metrics that you need to hit to be a feasible project, and we're in that space. So we're at the pre-feasibility stage, then you went to feasibility, and as you can see, you go down through the construction and operation. Our findings are, so Rory's already touched on the geothermal piece. So Tullamore has very good geothermal potential that can be built on. More recently, and we're going to conclude the report in the next week or two, and this is relatively new information, but the waste heat from anaerobic digestion. So Ishka Éireann have an AD and anaerobic digestion plant on the wastewater treatment works. It's actually quite a large source of heat. Up until we met with them, we were finding demand, users of heat, people who will consume heat, want different temperatures, doing the spatial analysis of where they're clustering. But what we're finding is we're going to have to bring heat. There's no spare waste heat out there. Turns out that the anaerobic digestion facility potentially has the ability to, redirect some and have it in summer versus winter. And there's a really interesting anchor source there, in addition to the geothermal. And then layered on top of that, is it biomass? Is it a large heat pump using the excess renewable electricity? There's various options we can look at on that. So what the findings are moving towards is, and we did look at multiple regions, and is it possible to cover the entire decarbonisation zone in the entire urban area? Basically, one of SEAI's key metrics is it's the amount of heat per unit distance. And we have to go in and draw maps and say, well, here's the buildings and here's what's the along the network would be. And what we're landing on, why there's multiple regions in which you could do, distinct district network, let's call them nodes, that then over time you would connect them up. The most promising one is very much to the north, underpinned by the hospital and the associated buildings around it, and nursing homes and such. They've a large degree of requirement for heat. They've required for high temperature heat. There's housing developments going in there, and the anaerobic digestion facilities is not far away. We also looked at some promising area down on the southeast, near the leisure centre and various other areas. But as a first step and something to demonstrate the value, demonstrate the benefit, learn from it, and that other people then come behind and scale this out over Ireland. We think it's quite unique where Tullamore has that source and consumers of heat in that northwest region, which does meet currently meeting the SEAI key metrics. What we also think is quite interesting is, and Rory touched on there, is that we'll call it there's the nodal system. The nodal system, what we're saying there is, developments, a new development housing estate. So do something that's one housing estate, kind of like a small isolated district heating network. That's also meeting the metrics. Now it's not as strong meeting, but does meet the metrics. It's not as strong as the case in the north of Tullamore there. And that's where you would go in and you would make one housing estate a district heat network from the beginning. And then over time, would it connect to another part of the network? So I suppose in conclusion, we need to get carbon out of the economy. Heat is the piece that's behind schedule. One of the main solutions is centralising that rather than everyone having the ground source heat pump, everyone having a gas boiler. Tullamore has definitely very positive characteristics to a development in the short stage. Thank you.